So, if gender, sex, and race are historical constructs and have a history, what does that mean within a French context? I'm going to give you a brief overview of some fundamental pieces that you need to keep in mind as we move through the course. So, you have to remember that the history of 20th century France is the story of a colonial and post-colonial nation that also engaged in and was a slave-holding nation. So when the French Revolution broke out in 1789, France had the most prosperous but also the most brutal slave colony in the island of Saint-Domingue, which is now known as Haiti. Throughout the 19th century, it built an empire that went from the Caribbean to Africa to Asia. And then it waged two wars in which it involved its imperial subjects before abandoning its empire. But just because France gave up its colonies, or its colonies wrestled their independence from French control, doesn't mean that the effects of colonialism were completely over and ended. And it does not mean that the colonial or empire and the central role of race and racism did not endure in political imagination and shape generations that come after. First, I think it's important to keep in mind that from 1789 onwards, the French political imaginary is the story of French Republican universalism. Republican universalism is the political regime that has characterized France since the 1789 French Revolution. And Republican universalism is the guarantee of equality before the law for all French citizens. So as Joan Scott has explained, and I quote, "It rests on a notion of politics that takes the abstract individual to be representative not only of citizens but also of the nation. It rests as well on the assumption that all citizens, whatever their origins, must assimilate to a singular standard in order to be fully French." This abstract individual that is presumed in French Republican universalism is presumed to be shorn of any particular form of identity and belonging. And what we will interrogate is how this ideal that is supposed to guarantee access and equality to all, irrespective of who they are and where they come from, in fact is riven with a profound contradiction because of this. What does it mean to renounce identity or belonging for different groups who have been discriminated against or who are made second-class citizens when they ask for recognition of their rights? The citizen is supposedly abstract, but it's always presumed male. So what does it mean for women demanding the right to access to political office? In the 1990s, only 3% of elected offices were held by women. This was the worst number in Europe. How do you address racism and discrimination, especially for North African immigrants who were formerly colonized subjects and whose children are fully French and French citizens, but never treated as if they are French, when it is illegal in France to collect information on race or national origin? France prides itself on being a colorblind society and yet does not address racism and discrimination. How do you have access to the same rights as heterosexual couples if you want to engage in marriage and parenthood when you're not supposed to claim a particular identity? So while universalism promotes equality, and it is an ideal, it also prevents the recognition of how difference is produced in French politics. Additionally, the language of French political discourse relies on a gendered imagination of the nation, which is embodied in the female figure of Marianne. Keep in mind that while the French nation is imagined to be Marianne, women did not get the vote until 1946. It was with Italy, one of the last European countries, where women obtained the vote, aside from Switzerland. Most had obtained the vote after World War I, and colonized Algerian subjects did not obtain full citizenship and the vote until 1958. This is, in general, the particular context, riven with tensions and paradoxes, and as we'll see, challenges and subversions, and what lies at the heart of recent and contemporary discussions and controversies. So the question we will pose is, how do you address inequalities, inequities of gender, race, and sexuality? Let's not forget class as well, when the political is premised upon the erasure and the denial of difference. We will see how people have challenged this, and we will see how we do this particular history throughout the reading and the questions and controversies we will examine.